You know, from Hercules fighting the Hydra all the way to Superman saving Metropolis, we seem to be obsessed with one specific kind of story, a single, powerful hero who shows up to save the entire world. This pattern pops up across different cultures and over thousands of years. But why? What is it about this one idea?
Seriously, why this story over and over again? Is it just some big coincidence? Or is it tapping into some deep psychological need we all share? Or is there a traceable pattern here, something that connects these figures across history? That's the mystery we're going to dig into.
Okay, so we're talking about a truly global phenomenon here. But to even begin to compare these incredible stories, we're going to need a consistent framework.
And that framework is going to be our analytical yardstick. Basically, a solid reference point we can use to measure all of these different stories against each other.
For this explainer, our yardstick is going to be the story of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. This is not about making a theological claim one way or the other. We are using this purely as an analytical tool. It just happens to be a really well-documented and historically influential pattern that works perfectly as a baseline for our comparison.
So what is this pattern exactly? Well, it breaks down into a specific 8-point checklist. It starts with a real historical teacher, someone who gathers a small inner circle. Then, and this is crucial, that person is publicly executed by the state. This is followed by a claim from his followers of a physical, bodily resurrection. From there, the death is reinterpreted as an atoning sacrifice, there's a promise to return, and the mission becomes universal, for everyone. The whole story is then presented as this single, history-splitting event. That's our checklist.
All right, now for the fun part. Let's take our 8-point pattern and see how some of the other major savior figures from history actually stack up. We're about to go on a rapid-fire tour of comparative religion. Let's do it!
First up, we have Saoshyant, from the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism. Right away, you can see some really striking similarities in the end goal, right? A final victory of good over evil, a resurrection of the dead, a world made new. But here's the key difference. It's all about timing. Saoshyant is an entirely future savior. It's all promise, with no historical precedent.
And that's why Saoshyant gets a 60% match. The story shares a lot of the big picture goals, but it's missing those key historical checklist items, like a past execution or a claimed resurrection.
Okay, next, let's take a look at Krishna from Hinduism. Here we've got a deity living among humans, which sounds familiar, but the worldview behind it is fundamentally different. History isn't a straight line. It's not a single event, but part of a vast, repeating cycle of cosmic ages.
And that fundamental difference in how time itself is viewed is exactly why Krishna's similarity score is much lower, down around 30%. The whole system just isn't anchored by a single, unrepeatable, history-splitting death and resurrection.
Now let's look at the Jewish expectation of a Davidic Messiah. This one is huge because it's really the direct conceptual parent of the Christian idea. It's this deep hope for a future anointed king from the line of David who will come to restore Israel and bring justice to the world.
And you can totally see that in the score, a really high 70%. This idea shares the most conceptual DNA with our pattern, focusing on that single chosen figure. The main difference, though, is that in mainstream Jewish thought, the Messiah is a human king, not a divine being whose death atones for the sins of the world.
Okay, let's pause here for a quick fact check, because this is so important. On the left, you see a claim that's all over the internet. The god Mithras had 12 disciples. But when you look at the actual primary evidence, on the right, well, there is none. 0 ancient sources back this up. It's almost certainly a misreading of ancient art that shows Mithras surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac.
This table just makes the differences so clear, doesn't it? Just look at the columns for state execution and atoning death. You see a consistent no for every single figure except our baseline. This kind of visual breakdown really shows you just how unique that specific combination of traits actually is.
So, this brings us right back to our core question. We've seen a lot of stories that share some of the pieces, but none of them have had the same kind of global impact. So, what was the winning formula?
I mean, really, why did this one particular narrative become arguably the most influential in all of human history? To answer that, we have to look beyond just the story itself and check out the unique historical circumstances that let it spread like wildfire.
When you really analyze it, it seems to come down to this really powerful 4-part combination. First, you just have a potent story with a ton of emotional voltage. Second, it had a universal pitch. It wasn't tied to one ethnic group. Third, you had the Roman Empire, which acted like a historical superhighway. And fourth,
a relentless, highly organized missionary drive from its followers.
And that second ingredient, the universal pitch, was a total game changer. This quote just captures it perfectly. So many other ancient traditions were deeply tied to a specific people or a particular land. But this message, it was designed to be incredibly portable. It could cross cultural and ethnic lines in a way that very few others could.
On top of that, the story itself turned out to be incredibly flexible. It was kind of like a chameleon. The central figure could be framed in totally different ways to appeal to vastly different audiences. For the poor and oppressed, he was a suffering victim. For the emperors and kings, he was a cosmic king. This adaptability was absolutely key to its survival and spread.
So let's put all these pieces together. What's the final synthesis here? When we look at this pattern, what are we really seeing? Here's the most crucial point. The story's incredible power isn't in any single element. Lots of people were teachers. Lots of people died tragically. The uniqueness, the real power, is in the specific combination of all the parts together. This is that unique package, a story that starts with a specific historical person, who is then publicly executed by a global empire, whose death is then seen as a universal sacrifice, which is then confirmed by a claimed resurrection, and finally is spread by a dedicated group with a global mission. No other major story ticks all of these boxes in this exact sequence.
But ultimately, when you zoom out, all of these stories are tapping into a really deep and fundamental human hope. As our source material puts it so well, people in crisis imagine a figure who will fix injustice, defeat death, and make the world right. This desire seems to be a permanent part of what it means to be human.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. If these powerful stories are always born from our deep need for rescue, what does our world, right here and right now, need saving from today?